Welcome, fellow researchers and seekers. This is Andrew Linnell, presenting to you through the wonders of technology. Note that we are not physically in the same room, nor are we in the same time. Technology today can help individual souls overcome limitations imposed by space and by time. We shall explore this secondary theme, the human soul, as we explore how the ancient myths have prepared us for our current age. You will see on the lower left my email should you wish to contact me afterwards or have some questions. You'll also see my website where this and many other lectures are housed. This is the first in a series of lectures under the title Technology's Role in Human Evolution. Some of the content herein appears in the forthcoming book series with this same title. In this talk, we're going to take a fresh and healthy look at mythology as we ask the question, could it be that these myths were meant to prepare us for the times in which we live? To properly answer such a question begs an understanding of reincarnation. For some of you, this may lead to unusual and complex thoughts. Thus, as we proceed through this talk, I would like to invite each of you to think like an ancient Greek, that is, with a robust imagination that can bring pictures to life. Most people would say that mythology is fiction, stories made up in the past to explain the unexplainable. Well, let's take a look at the Encyclopedia Britannica that says Greek mythology is a body of stories about gods, heroes, and rituals of the ancient Greeks. It goes on to say that the pious people of those ancient Greek times viewed these stories as true accounts. We'll keep that in mind, as true accounts. And lastly, it says that these Greek myths have had a major influence on Western culture, especially in our arts and literature. So we'll explore these points in more depth. In order to understand Greek mythology, however, we need to also understand the model that the Greeks had of reality. Here, in the third column, we see their elements, or four elements. On the bottom row, earth. And then above that, water, or the liquid state. Above that, air, or the gaseous state. And finally, fire, or the plasma state, we would say in physics. Related to these are the four kingdoms of nature. On the bottom, we have the mineral kingdom. Above that, the plant kingdom. Above that, the animal. And finally, the fourth kingdom, the human kingdom. The base kingdom, the mineral, is defined as lifeless matter. The next higher kingdom, the plant, adds to this lifeless matter life with what is called in other traditions prana or chi, or as I will call it herein, the etheric body. Sometimes I will add the life body. Next, above the plant comes the animal kingdom, which is comprised of individual living beings, each with an inner life. That is, with emotions and instincts. Finally, the fourth, the human kingdom, includes not only the inner life, but adds to this the knowing knower, the one who knows that he or she knows, the one with self-consciousness. This is called the ego with a capital E, or the I am. When one is awake, these four, the ego, astral, life, and physical bodies, are all working harmoniously together. But when we fall asleep, our consciousness changes because our ego and astral bodies leave our etheric and physical bodies behind in the bed. Should our etheric body or life body also depart, we would then experience death, and our physical body would become ruled by only the physical laws of nature. And these would begin to cause the physical body to decay. So long as we are alive, the life body overcomes this natural tearing down of the physical body. And the body of mythological works from the ancient past we know is vast. Everywhere in the world there are mythological traditions. Tonight we will look at merely two related Greek myths, namely the stories of Prometheus and Hephaestus. In the time that these stories take place, Zeus was king of the gods. Prometheus, whose name means thinking in advance, was a titan from the previous generation of gods. The brother of this titan, Epimetheus, means thinking afterwards, or in today's parlance, being a Monday morning quarterback. All titans were descended from the ancient Greek god Uranus, which means heaven, or his wife Gaia, or earth. In Vedantic traditions, Uranus is the same god as Varuna. As conditions on the planet Earth changed, the son of the previous god would usurp the throne. Thus, Uranus and the primordial deities were dethroned by Cronus, that is the god of time, and the 12 titans. These, in turn, were dethroned by Cronus's son, Zeus. The losers of the battle in heaven, in this last battle between Zeus and Cronus, were cast, it says, into the underworld. This included all of the titans, except for the two thinking ones, namely Prometheus and Epimetheus, in part because they had sided with Zeus. After the war, Zeus asked Prometheus to help form the physical body for mankind. Later, Zeus became disenchanted with how humanity was developing and wanted to exterminate it because they had become corrupted. Now, Prometheus had become strongly connected to humanity, so he decides to help humanity survive. He figures out how he could offer a gift to humanity that would render them no longer dependent on Zeus. What were these gifts? Namely, writing and the arts, and above all, the use of fire, that is, inner fire. Now Zeus was furious. He could not take back what Prometheus, a god, had done. However, Zeus could punish him, and so Prometheus was chained to the Caucasus rocks, and there he was forced to endure much suffering over a long period of time. Now Prometheus knows a secret that even Zeus did not know. Thus, Zeus sends Hermes, the messenger of the gods, to try to get Prometheus to reveal it. But Prometheus does not betray this secret. Zeus then causes Hephaestus to build an automaton of a beautiful woman. This is who we know as Pandora. She is adorned with all the external attributes that appealed to mankind. And she is sent with what's called, in today's terminology, Pandora's box, in which other gifts from the gods to mankind were contained. Pandora went to Epimetheus. Prometheus warns his brother not to accept any such gifts, but Prometheus was so charmed by Pandora, he was persuaded to have the box opened. As you know, the gods' gifts escaped. They constituted human miseries and sufferings. But there was one gift remaining in the box, hope. When we see the box as a coffin, we see here a picture of reincarnation and karma. It is a difficult lesson, but these reincarnation and karma are indeed gifts from the gods. And although they constitute human miseries and sufferings, they still are a gift from these gods. Now, I'm going to tell you a story, and this is the story I call The Birth of the God of Technology. It's a little funny, I call this a historical fiction of Hephaestus, but I didn't know what else to call it, even though we are talking about mythology. And so here is how the story goes. Sit back and enjoy it. It was a long time ago when Zeus and Hera were king and queen of the gods. The anticipated day had come. Many were gathered in the courtyard. Others were flying into Olympus. Excitement was obvious in their glowing faces. Their many conversations grew louder and louder. Let's listen in. She will be a radiant goddess, proclaimed Demeter with a satisfied smile. This child will bring something new to Zeus's kingdom, added Athena. For with this new god, the wisdom of our astral realm shall expand. Dionysus, who had just flown in and plucked an apple from a nearby tree in the courtyard, took a big bite, and while chewing, remarked, I think it's a boy. The gods smiled at these pronouncements. Each had their own hopes for this child of their king and queen, but they chose not to share with their peers these hopes, leaving the outcome to mystery. The summit of Olympus glowed with expectation as a trumpet rang out, and a hush descended upon the summit as Zeus and Hera walked out arm in arm upon a balcony overlooking the courtyard. Even the sun felt closer, as if it too was bending its ear to hear. The time has come, Zeus thundered. Hera, bring forth our child. Hera reached within, and indeed brought forth a child. She held it up for all the gods to see. But there was no applause on Olympus, no godly greetings of congratulations. It felt even the sun looked away. Poseidon, standing closest to the child, hung his head. Yuck, bellowed Artemis. All the gods at first frowned at this discretion, but in feeling the same emotion, none dared scold the warrior god. Artemis took a deep breath, which restored his normal countenance, thus allowing him to declare, I have many battles to manage. And with that he flew off. One by one, each god, with eyes looking down, faded away, till only Zeus with Hera remained with their newborn son. The queen burst into tears. What? Oh, what did we do wrong? She asked Zeus. Soon the tears stopped, and fire leapt into her eyes. Zeus cowered back as he felt her burning stare. He knew she was about to accuse him of being the cause of their child's malformed feet. He didn't get these from me, she hollered at him. Thou feet look like goat's feet. Zeus looked toward the horizon as he drew a long breath that stirred even the summit's air. He held it a while, pondering a response to his wife's words. Slowly he exhaled as he replied, Even I, king of this realm, do not know the cause of these ugly feet on your son. I can foresee that a strange destiny awaits him. And he turned and walked back into the palace, leaving Hera and son alone on the balcony. Hera wept. She held the boy close to her breast, hoping by surrounding him with her love that he would magically be transformed into the full beauty inherent in each of the gods. While kissing his forehead, she thought, How could the queen of the gods give birth to the first and only ugly god? Her tears streamed now, dampening her son's scalp. A cloud passed in front of the warm sun, and with it arose in her mind the thought, perhaps this child is not a true god. For after all gods are beautiful. Perhaps some other being has corrupted the process, thereby affecting his feet. Her tears suddenly stopped as a powerful tsunami-like impulse welled up in her. She put her son down and stepped to the edge of the balcony, her eyes scanning the world below, looking off the summit of Olympus. There is where he belongs. She leaned back, picked up her son, and with a mighty and emotional heave, threw him off of Olympus. No descendants of mine shall be burdened with such ugliness, she said, watching his body sail out of sight. Thus we come to the end of our story, but I wish to offer you a bit of an epilogue. You see, no one on Olympus ever asked Hera or Zeus about their son or his whereabouts. This baby god Hephaestus landed on the island of Lemnos. Here, marooned on the Aegean Sea, he was raised by a tribe known as Sintians, whose distinguishing characteristics, keep this in mind as we go through the rest of the book, was their incomprehensible speech and writing. On Lemnos, Hephaestus developed his godly skills of metallurgy and technology. He built his volcanic forge on the nearby island of Chryse, where he built an amazing assortment of structures, such as thrones for the gods on Olympus and armor for Achilles for his Trojan battles. For our purposes, perhaps the most notable achievement was the building of Pandora, an automaton so superbly constructed that even the Titan god Prometheus was so charmed by her seemingly authentic womanly charms that, according to legend, he wished to marry her. Speaking of marriage, when Hephaestus matured, he met and married the Thracian nymph Cabrio. Cabrio was the daughter of the sea god Prometheus, who in turn was the eldest son of Poseidon. The ancestral home of Cabrio's family was the island of Pharos, which was in the delta of the river Nile. In the nymph Cabrio, we have the source for the offspring of the ancient Egyptian mysteries. We'll hear more about that momentarily. Incidentally, the famous lighthouse of Alexander was built upon this island of Pharos. Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, Book 36, Chapter 13, speaks of a remarkable labyrinth that existed on this island, Lemnos, and it was presumably built by Hephaestus. Perhaps the rising sea level has covered both this and the forge of his on Chryse. It is important for us to realize that the times of Hephaestus is an era of the coming of a new generation of gods. With Cabrio, Hephaestus fathered a tribe called the Cabaroi, whose initiatory rites we know today as the Samothracian mysteries. The Teutonic mysteries may also be related, as these have to do with the mysteries of what is below the Earth's surface, such as what brings about volcanoes. And incidentally, you should know Gaia has to do with the living surface of the Earth, whereas these mysteries with what's below the surface. Now, fitting with the gods of his time, Hephaestus also had consorts in his many homes. Too many goddesses to mention But now you might ask, if Hephaestus was thrown off of Olympus, how was it that he was given Aphrodite for when he was on Olympus? Well, eventually Hephaestus is allowed to return to Olympus. And he rides into the city triumphantly upon a donkey. Interestingly, something that Christ Jesus would repeat in riding into Jerusalem. We'll return to our myths now and return to Prometheus. And Prometheus has found out that he can be freed from the rocks and from the chains made by Hephaestus. The chains that Hephaestus made per Zeus's command. But he can only be freed from these Caucasus rocks through the intervention of an initiate. This initiate is Heracles, also known as Hercules, who performs the necessary 12 labors. 12, you might ask? Yes. It took a profound individual who could be initiated into each mystery of the zodiac. And by doing so, Hercules became a human being who was able to rise up to the level of those gods. Heracles, it is said, accomplished this within the Eleusinian mysteries. Even after these feats, Heracles, some significant sacrifice was still required. And the centaur, Chiron, offered to be the sacrifice. Here we can realize that the story is speaking to the universal within each of us. We all are still becoming human. We still have animal nature within our astral body. And only when we realize how we are still part animal in our soul life, will we then be able to make this sacrifice, the sacrifice of our animality. Now we need to take a look at the other mythology, the Hephaestus story, and how it relates. And we see that with Pandora, we have this connection. Although this got in with the chains as well that held Prometheus to the rocks. Although this god, Hephaestus, remains behind the scenes in the other story, he is very much a part of the Promethean myth. Now, the one who builds Pandora, of course, is this god of technology, the geek of the Greeks, Hephaestus. Because as a god who grows up on the earth and not on Olympus, he develops knowledge of and for the earth that the other gods do not have. He comes to know about the forces of its interior, including the fire of volcanoes. So we have two types of fire. The gift of inner fire from Prometheus given to humanity, and the fire in nature used by Hephaestus and then by humanity in metallurgy and the other arts. Pan means all, and Dora, gifts, is constructed, as we know, by this unusual god Hephaestus. While the other gods operate only within the astral realm, Hephaestus works upon the mineral kingdom. We need to ask, again, why was Hephaestus thrown off of Olympus? After all, he was the son of Zeus and Hera. But when his mother, as we heard in this story, Hera, saw his malformed foot, and perhaps it did appear like that of a goat's foot, she wanted his ugliness out of his sight. You see, the gods were all beautiful, each with perfect form for their respective role. No god had ever been malformed. And so she throws her baby off the astral realm of Olympus to the earth and out of her sight. Now, as a god on the earth, Hephaestus developed special talents such as building automatons that could ascend to and descend from Olympus. Fascinating. Hephaestus built thrones, as we heard, for each of the gods. And interestingly, the one he built for his mother, Hera, is equipped with the world's first Velcro. When Hera sits down in her throne, she cannot get back up. Hephaestus also built the chains that hold Prometheus to the Caucasus rocks. Rudolf Steiner describes how humanity in an ancient time experienced these gods as an everyday occurrence. This would be back in Atlantean times. Later, humanity evolves, and we come to a transition time that Rudolf Steiner says begins roughly around the year 3000 BC and extended till around 800 BC, a time when culture everywhere was led by its respective mystery centers. This was also the time when the myths were passed along according to each local oral tradition. Then, after 800 BC, according to Rudolf Steiner, decadence began to seep into the mystery centers. We can easily surmise the supreme role that these mystery centers played in their time by the written books that appear after the mysteries were well faded, such as Cicero's book Laws, where he praises the Athenians' mystery center with the words, "For among the many excellent and indeed divine institutions which you, Athens, has brought forth and contributed to human life, none, in my opinion, is better than these mysteries." Now, just as our evolution of consciousness continues today, so has it been evolving throughout the time of human life on Earth. Logical thinking arose during the era of Aristotle. We can ask what kind of consciousness might have existed before 800 BC or before 3000 BC. According to Rudolf Steiner's research, human consciousness in those ancient times thought in pictures that we can say are similar to the pictures we have when we are dreaming today. Back in those times, people would not say, "I think," for that does not arise until well after 1000 BC. Rather, people felt back then that a spiritual being thought in them, and one experienced or merely saw the thought as one might see an object with their eyes. Modern science has restricted itself to only what is observable by human physical senses or measurable by physical instruments. Today, however, science is crossing a threshold where it is confronting consciousness. Cultivation of a spiritual science can today extend the boundaries of our physical sciences. Also, our concepts of mythology are changing. We've seen the one thought that mythologies arose as made-up stories to explain the unexplainable. Well, this continues to change, and since Joseph Campbell's book, The Power of Myth, researchers have been taking a fresh look at mythology and how it worked symbolically upon its associated people. So this is continuing to evolve, and an example can be found in the work of the former priest and now author John Dominic Crossan, who states concerning mythology, "My point, once again, is not that those ancient people told literal stories and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically and we are now dumb enough to take them literally." So we found two, and I'd like to introduce a third possible interpretation of myths. The first that we saw in the beginning are that the myths are exoteric in their meaning. So they are describing literal events in which the gods were inserted into a historical story to try to explain what's going on. Then we have an interpretation that says these are allegorical stories that are dealing with human struggles. And now we can offer a third interpretation, that these are stories of the occult or hidden and have significance that can be seen, but not in the physical, but rather as something happening in the spiritual realm. These stories we find in the Akashic record. They originated with the ancient mystery centers. And why, we might ask? Well, to answer this, we must also answer the question, what was the purpose of these mystery centers? Then we can realize what purpose the various myths had. We will find that they were not fiction. In fact, they were told to prepare humanity specifically for the times that we now live in. You see, before 3000 BC, it was commonplace for someone to experience a spiritual being, but a spiritual being on the astral plane with their consciousness. They would not see these beings, as we sometimes imagine, running around here on the physical plane. After 3000 BC, there was this transition time for humanity, a transition to when no knowledge of the spiritual world except in traditions continued to exist. When the door to the spiritual world was closing, it was closing so that freedom could be developed. Obviously, not everyone could be initiated. Most of each of the ethnic tribes had to proceed on with this destiny that awaited humanity to where the doors to the spiritual world would be closed. Then, after this transition period, after 800 BC, it became more and more commonplace to deny the existence of a spiritual world. Once that denial was in place, then the separation of humanity from the spiritual world was complete. During this transition, the folk spirit of an ethnic group could still guide its people as it had done, but now via the mystery centers. But in order for humanity to become free, the spiritual world had to withdraw, albeit gradually, so that eventually even the mystery centers would have to close. All right, let's briefly review this transition period when the various myths came into being. We find in them wisdom that still guided the masses, even as their environment and consciousness were changing. Truth. It was important for all to adhere to truth and to experience truth in the myths. Truth was imparted in the stories that the common man could grasp. Even Christ Jesus, when speaking to the masses, had to speak in parables. The guidance from the gods helped to prepare their people, their ethnic people, as the god of the ethnic group, not only for their present, but also for their future. And so they gave the mythologies, as we're seeing, not only for their present, but more importantly, for their future. In fact, their far future. Lastly, I just want to comment that these masses during this time of the arrival of the mythologies, this transitory period, we can say that the masses had a collective consciousness, a collective picture consciousness. Now we've seen that this transition period is dated from about 3000 BC to around 800 BC. Of course, slightly different in different parts of the world. And so in particular, this fits for the Greek period. During this time, there was a change of consciousness from this picture consciousness to an abstract logical thinking. This begins around 800 BC and continues to develop, so that about 1500 AD, the common person could say, out of freedom, I think. Initiation in the Mystery Center enabled the priests and priestesses to experience a spiritual life with their gods, while the rest of the people were continuing to advance according to the divine will and advance towards materialism and also freedom. So one could actually say that these initiates, these priests and priestesses, were able to go back in time to where the common experience was to be able to see and have conversation with these guiding spirits. Now, these initiates felt a great reverence, not only for their folk god, but also for their own people. They felt a responsibility not only for their present time, but for their future, in part because blood ties were powerfully strong back then. What was experienced on the astral plane was imparted as truthful wisdom, not in logical concepts that are suitable for today, but rather in what was suitable in their time, this picture consciousness. And these pictures lived in the people's etheric bodies. We know they could repeat vast epics after hearing them only one time. When the etheric body was eventually laid aside after death, so were these pictures, but they were not lost. After the journey, the sojourn from death until the coming rebirth to a new life, these memories were picked up again upon one's approach to their new incarnation. The myths then showed the incarnating person something about their upcoming life, so that they could properly prepare for it while still in the spiritual world. Now, according to Clement of Alexandria in his book Stromata, the second book, the poet, Greek poet Aeschylus, was thought to have revealed secrets of the Eleusinian mysteries on stage and thus had to flee for his life. He ran to the altar of Dionysus, where he proved that he was not an initiate. You see, he had to do this because betrayal of the secrets of the mysteries meant death. So you might say, aren't mythologies a betrayal of the mysteries? Well, as we've seen, the priests and priestesses did pass along appropriate wisdom. But not everything was being passed along. And when it was passed along in this picture form. It is my position that Aristotle, knowing that the time of the ancient mysteries was ending, gave to Alexander a mission to set up libraries in which as much of the wisdom as possible of the fading mysteries could be recorded before it was lost. After Rome conquered Greece, many of its statues were carried off to Italy. Then, after the Goths overran Italy, these treasures, which were deemed worthless, disappeared into the ground, only to be exhumed later as the Renaissance rediscovered these myths. The Renaissance art schools explored the link between these myths and Christianity. Greek myths became a favorite subject for a Renaissance artist who learned in their schools about the connection that these ancient myths had to the coming Christianity. Not only did these Greek myths have this, we look at Grimm's fairy tales and can see in the story of Briar Rose, which you probably know as Sleeping Beauty, a story that helps prepare us for our current times. Here the princess falls into a long sleep upon pricking her finger on a needle of a spinning wheel. Interestingly, the spinning wheel is the symbol of technology for its time. And when she pricks her finger, she can no longer see into the spiritual world. And she and the rest of all of her people fall asleep as their gaze through technology is upon the material world. To properly grasp the essence of these fairy tales, we must see each of the characters as aspects of our own soul and spirit. The princess or heroine typically represents our soul. The prince who comes to awaken her is not part of her kingdom, but as spirit comes from not the astral, but from another realm. Our soul, like the princess, sleeps until this new spirit can awaken her to the reality of the spiritual world. The sleep of the princess is like a Kali Yuga, as foretold in the Vedic texts. As we come closer to our times, Mary Shelley, the author, while returning in 1818 from a study group that dealt with mythology, got the inspiration for her story, get this title, Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. Too often we drop the rest of that title and just call it Frankenstein. And of course, Frankenstein was the creator, the doctor, not the monster. She had an imagination of the connection of this Promethean myth to the developing science of her time. Her picture revealed that the direction of technology would lead, as it does in her story, to the creation of a near-human creature through the use of electricity. Her story wrestles with the question, could such a creature be capable of morals and love? Her foresight for our times was absolutely remarkable. Now we find increasingly many Promethean characters and Hephaestian automatons in today's stories, especially in our movies, such as Transcendence, The Matrix, and Ex Machina. And do we already have Pandora amongst us? Our sex bots, those are robots intended for use as sexual dolls, similar to Pandora? What new human miseries and sufferings might ensue? Now, I wish to sort of recapitulate what we've looked at this evening to make my final points. And here we see the first half of a curve, and it begins with a time when human consciousness, the individuals who had this, saw the astral realm as its reality and the physical realm as Maya, as illusion. Back then it was common to experience other spiritual beings, but on the astral plane. Eventually the doors to the spiritual world began to close as humanity was destined to develop freedom with love. This is that transition age that I talked about, the age of the ancient mysteries, and this flourished until around the year 1000 BC. Although the mystery centers lingered on until the 4th century AD, their symbolic end came when Herostratus, seeking fame, threw a burning torch into one of the mystery centers in 356 BC. Incidentally, on the same day that Alexander the Great was born. The initiate, Aristotle, knew that some individuals were, for the first time, able to say, I think, or I feel, or it is I who wills. This meant that the oral traditions could no longer be trusted because egoism was rising. Thus, it is my conclusion that Aristotle intended, with the mission he gave Alexander, the establishment of libraries in which the wisdom of the mysteries could be recorded before they were corrupted or worse, lost. As the spiritual world faded, materialism could arise. By the time of the Renaissance, the common man could say, I think. Materialism, as it drove away the gods, supported through this separation the development of freedom, thereby allowing Darwinism to figuratively replace religion. And now, here we are, and where do we go from here? Will the descent continue, or are we at a turning point? Indeed, we are. Such a free decision point has never existed before in human evolution. And we can see here that we actually will be going in both directions. One, a Promethean, the other, a Hephaestus one. Human consciousness is to expand by going in both. We can see Prometheus as the archetypal initiate of our age. Today, one is initiated not only into wisdom, but also into deeds that require inner strength and inner fire. Yet Prometheus must run through a whole gamut of suffering. Again, because great initiates of today must take on life's suffering. We have seen how at least two of the Greek myths are intertwined. We found in these two myths, one, Hephaestus, the one who represents the question, what in the human is becoming godlike? Who can be like God? We looked at the question, why was he thrown off of Olympus? The answer, because, like humans, he was imperfect. He has a malformed foot for standing on the earth. Or, perhaps more accurately, for standing on Olympus. As the god of technology, he is adept in the use of nature's fire. But what kind of an astral god is he? For his knowledge is derived from the earth. And one day, he will return to Olympus. And we should ask, what is Olympus? And he will return, oddly, on a donkey. We saw who else rides into a city triumphantly on a donkey. Prometheus represents human foresight and an inner use of fire, enthusiasm, a real interest in one's work or in others. Today, this is chained to the mineral kingdom. It is an astral image of our times that sees our souls chained to the mineral kingdom. And today, we suffer attacks on our liver. Look at what happens from pain pills, Vicodin, statins, hepatitis, alcohol, and many other vultures that gnaw upon our liver. We are releasable only by initiation and the sacrifice of our inner animal, our own centaur. It is interesting to note that Christ, in bringing redemption, declared, "Upon this rock I build my church." Note, he did not say, of course, "Behold, I build my castles in the clouds." Thus, development of a spiritual science must begin upon existing science. that is, upon this rock, and expand from there. Spiritual enthusiasm now no longer proceeds from mere mystical obscurity, but now from souls elevated by clarity of thought. We have seen how mythology was indeed a literal story about happenings of the past, as well as what to expect and prepare for the future. These stories take place within the spiritual world, that is, upon the astral plane, where the gods of then could be experienced. The myths, like the stories of one's own life, remained in one's memory, where, after death, they eventually were laid aside. And then, as one approached a new incarnation, these stories arose again, thereby instructing us on how to prepare for our coming life. Redemption of our inner Prometheus is our task in this age. We must also deal with our inner Hephaestus and help him to ride back to Olympus. These are within each human soul, within the astral plane. Hephaestus as a god is concerned with the material world and transforming it, spiritualizing it, whereas Prometheus, as an older god, a titan, whose domain is thinking in advance, and thus he represents the coming consciousness soul. Prometheus, as his thinking brother, who rules over thinking, that reflects on what has been experienced in order to better understand it, he represents the intellectual soul. Prometheus would marry an automaton such as Pandora, while Prometheus can use his consciousness to see such a marriage will lead to disasters. Now, I hope to continue this research with more in-depth study on 4 topics. 1, what does this mean for one to ride a donkey triumphantly back home? Why a donkey? 2, what effect can we glean from these myths to help us understand the illnesses of our age and to help with their healing? 3, how might Promethean thinking in our age be characterized? Is it what in other traditions is called monist thinking? Or is it related to computer programming? And what is this vulture that gnaws at our liver? What kind of astrality? And fourthly, can we compare Epimetheus and Prometheus to Cain and Abel, or I should say to Abel and Cain? I'd like to follow the fire knowledge of Cain to Hiram Abiff, who built Solomon's temple, and then on to the mysteries known once by the Freemasons. So here we reach the end of our journey together. Now, if you have questions, I have given you my email in the front, and I will try to answer any of them. Here at the close, I have just a review of the 4 kingdoms and their 4 respective elements, and a picture of Athena with Heracles that comes from around the 5th century BC. And so thank you all for your participation, and I wish you all well.